Welcome to the SaaS Revolution Show, a podcast by SaaStock. Here we interview SaaS founders from around the world who've been there and done that, as they share the ins and outs of how they built their businesses, their operations, their path to securing investment, and more. Our mission with the podcast is to help you, the founder, learn how to scale your SaaS, maintain your well-being, and navigate the complexities of this ever-changing industry. I'm your host, Alex Duma, and together we'll explore the good, the bad, and the ugly in the journey to SaaS success. Welcome back to the SaaS Revolution Show. I am your host, Alex Duma, CEO, founder of SaaStock. Delighted to be joined today by David Politis, who's the founder and exec chair at Better Cloud. Welcome, David.
Hey, Alex. Good to see you.
Good to see you again. I met you in person for the first time at SaaStock USA recently in Austin. So I really appreciate you coming down and speaking to Austin. I don't say this to everybody, and I think I did say it to you on email, like post event, that it was one of my favorite talks that I got to see at the event. I actually got to see quite a few. Like usually I'm like pulled left, right, and center, but the team seemed to have most things I would say kind of in hand. And I know you were speaking, I think, at the end of the first day, but it was just definitely one of my highlights. So appreciate that, and now coming onto the podcast. So thanks for your time, David, and also
thank you
back to the community. So David, look, I always start podcasts. I want to know our guests a little bit better for the audience. So we'll start with that. We won't buck the trend. So please can tell us, who is David Politis?
It's a lot here. You know, I'm an entrepreneur, founder, operator, father, husband, brother, son, New Yorker, native New Yorker, born and raised here. So, but really for me, honestly, from day one, from a really early age, all I wanted to do was be an entrepreneur, literally. I ask people in interviews a lot of times, what's your dream job? You could do anything in the world. Money doesn't matter. And then they would ask me the same question. I said, doing what I'm doing, starting and running companies. So that's who I am.
Why do you think, have you ever reflected on that? Like why you've always wanted to start businesses, right? I think I've thought about this. I was reading an article yesterday. It was an interview with, I think, Danny Reimer from Index. And he was asked, are entrepreneurs born or are they made? He said both, right? But you've always wanted to be one. Have you ever thought about what are the reasons why? Was there like an inspiration, from family?
100%. 100%. I know from a very young age, it really comes from my father. He came to the U.S. from Greece, when he was in his 20s and worked in a bunch of different businesses and ultimately started his own. And I grew up my entire life with him having businesses, different kind of businesses. He was in real estate for a while. Then he started getting into international finance. Then he got into all kinds of different businesses. And from a very young age, he took me with him everywhere. He took me to the construction sites in Harlem and in the Bronx. We went to China, Nigeria, Ukraine, Lithuania, all over the world. He would take me with him. When I got to college, he BCC'd me on every email that he sent, and so I grew up just seeing that and being around that. When I wanted to spend time with him, I would go to his office and sit with him. And that, for me, from literally as young as I can remember, I just wanted to be him. I just wanted to be an entrepreneur. And that was always my dream. I tried to drop out of college actually at one point because I just wanted to start a company. And my mother, who's a doctor, she said, please get a diploma. My dad said, if you drop out, I'll give you any money we save so you can start a company. So, but I did graduate, barely, but I did.
Quick question on that. Have you ever BCC'd your kids to emails, and have you brought them into the office as well?
I have. So my kids are 10 and 8, two boys, Noah and Sammy. And I'd been taking them to the office since they were born, actually, even earlier than my father did it with me. And only recently have they been old enough to really come into meetings and sit in meetings. And so now I take them with me to meetings. They sit with me. They take notes. They listen to my Zoom calls. They really, and they talk, we talk about it. You know, what's so interesting is at 10 and 8, at least for me, you would assume it's hard to have a conversation about complex business concepts, but we do. We literally will I'll have a meeting, and then I'll ask them, what do you think? And they'll say, oh, what does ICP mean? What does this mean? I prepare when I do presentations, like when I did the SaaStock presentation, that was the first time I had done a talk in a year, 2 years. I actually did my entire preparation with them. I gave them my computer, and I told them to click the button on the slides, and I was doing the pitch, I was doing the talk to them.
I mean, given how good that talk was, I wonder if we need to get them to vet all the other SaaStock speakers. So depending on their schedules, right? The next SaaStock in Dublin in October. But that sounds great. And look, I'm actually inspired by that. I've got 2 kids, 7 and 9, both girls. Like, occasionally I ask them what they want to do in life. They don't really know, right? At the moment. And I think that's fine. And obviously I think about my own entrepreneurial career. I'm a first-time entrepreneur now, also investor, as it's in the public domain as well. And I know that this is real. Like, not only is it bloody difficult, as we spoke about, I think, like before we were recording, but there is like so much reward and opportunity to create wealth as well. And as whether one should go through the school system and then once they sort of like graduate from that, enter into executive careers, which there's nothing wrong with that, but it's also you have to pick the right company to make a lot of money in executive careers, and a lot of people just kind of get stuck in I think a kind of nowhere land, right? But often sort of reflective of that, but I think inspiring for me there to kind of hear that.
I think the other important thing, at least for me, is I think it's important for kids to see their parents work and to understand that work is not easy, actually. And that's one of the things for me. I grew up where my father didn't hold back all the stresses, all the good and the bad. I saw all of that, and there was no hiding that, and I think it's important because life isn't easy, work isn't easy, and I think it's important to see like this. It's hard. It's hard, and I believe that actually, like, that's a big part. From my wife and I talk about this all the time. Like, I think that it's important for kids to see that because they grow up with a different mindset, I think, about work. No,
definitely, and it's good that it didn't put you off, and is perhaps not putting you off as well, right? Because one would think, and when I speak to like SaaStock founder members, not just them, but other founders, a lot of them think when they sell their business that they perhaps would never go back to running a SaaS company or being an entrepreneur. Often they do, right? When you see people that exit, right? But it's super interesting. But let's just jump into also like the founding story of Better Cloud, right? So you built a really significant business, which you're now the exec chair of. But let's go down to like the beginning there. What is the founding story?
Yeah, so I'm going to go back a little further than Better Cloud, just because I think it gives context to how I ended up with Better Cloud. So I started my career at a company 20 years ago in the voice over IP space, ultimately SaaS, cloud space, before those terms were even being used, literally. And when I joined the company, I was a marketing assistant, 15, 16-person company. Ultimately, everyone at the company got fired. And 6 months into my first job out of undergrad, the founders came to me and said, "Do you want to be the CEO? And this engineer will be the CTO." And both of us were clearly not qualified to do those jobs. And we took over that business, and we built one of the first ever cloud PBXs, cloud-based phone systems running over the public internet, one of the first ever in 2005. And we scaled that business to 20 million. Ultimately, even after I left, it got to 80 million of ARR. And that was my first opportunity at entrepreneurship without actually founding a company. I got to get that. It was basically getting an MBA without, starting the company. And that was on so many levels, such an amazing experience. And I loved it, and I went from there to a company called Cloud Sherpas, and Cloud Sherpas was now the first or let's say largest Google Cloud partner. And they helped literally thousands of companies migrate to Google Cloud in the early days, 2010, 2011. And there was my first exposure to a services company, a consulting company. I had only experienced product. Then I had this experience with consulting services, and we started selling to the larger enterprise type customers, which I had never experienced. So that was my next kind of step in my journey. And it was at Cloud Sherpas that as we were migrating people, again, you have to rewind to 2010, 11, Satya Nadella hasn't taken over Microsoft yet. Steve Ballmer, I went to a conference where he said exchange on-prem forever. Like literally that was the mindset of Microsoft. Google was crushing them. And we had this opportunity to move these people to Google Apps at the time, Gmail, Google Drive, all of that, now called Google Workspace. And when we did, all these customers were asking us, the services consulting company, hey, can you help us with this problem we have with IT? We have to see all the files that are in Drive. We have to standardize email signatures, basic stuff that Google didn't offer themselves natively in their admin console. So the idea was, instead of having a services consulting company, let's build a product company to solve these problems. So we started Better Cloud, call it early 2012, based at the beginning of 2012, and the idea was we are going to create a better admin console for Google Apps or Google Workspace. That's how the company started. Over 12 years, it went from being the first ever doing that to actually the first ever SaaS management platform where we didn't just manage Google Apps, Google Workspace, but Salesforce and Microsoft 365 and Dropbox and Box. And we now, if you look at Better Cloud 12 years later, now the product allows companies to see which applications they use in their environment, how much they're spending. It lets them manage their users onboard, offboard, all the automated management that needs to happen on a day-to-day basis, and lets them secure the data that lives in those applications. So it's been this evolution over all of this time, but it was really my experience in SaaS, high-velocity sales, then more enterprise services, consulting, understanding where the gaps were, ultimately that led me to start Better Cloud. And then, frankly, it was the reason I wanted to go back all the way there is because it was the lessons that I learned at those companies that allowed me to scale Better Cloud, to where it is today.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. We actually share some parallels or similarities in career, but in that I also came from the voice over IP space. Like we're actually selling equipment like session border controllers and then hosted PBX, and you're like a reseller of Broadsoft. And so I know like Mike Tesla from Broadsoft.
Yes, yeah.
He's been on the podcast and shared his story. Also, then before eventually coming into SaaStock. Oh, and when you were talking about that in the early days, that first instance of Better Cloud, to obviously what we know and what you said it is now, I was thinking about the meme and wonder if you've done this, like how it started and how it's going. Seeing that visualization, and so if you haven't done one, you need to do that. So
they're
quite big these days. And to help paint a picture, then so obviously Better Cloud has been running, I think you said, like 12 years. Like, what data can you share about the company? Size and revenue, whatever.
Definitely. So the company we started. We started the company actually in what today would be called product-led growth type of mode, but really it was a freemium model that we called it back then. And we started with that. We actually started free. Then we put up a paywall, went to freemium. First dollar of revenue was 2014. And from 2014, we scaled, frankly, with a lot of customers in the beginning, thousands of customers, very low ASP. And again, freemium, product-led growth. And then over time, we started to move more and more up market and take over a bigger part of the infrastructure, as we started to integrate to more SaaS applications. And so really up until the point, that we sold to Vista, which was a couple of years ago, we were kind of on the march to $100 million of ARR. And since we did the deal with them, we've done an acquisition. It looks like there may be a couple more coming. Yeah. And so, yeah, that kind of gives you a overall sense of the business.
Awesome. No, thanks for sharing that. And I saw your acquisition, actually, the recent one. You bought a product from G2. Is that right?
Yeah. So G2, it's interesting. G2 acquired a product years ago that does SaaS spend management. And if you think about it, it makes sense because G2 has all these reviews. It has all this understanding of who's using which applications. And this was the next layer on top, which was how much are they spending on those applications? Yeah. And for Better Cloud, it also makes a lot of sense because for us, we have all the user data, we have all the application data, and a lot of our customers, especially as you can imagine in today's world, more frankly than ever before, people need to understand how much are they spending? Are there duplicate applications? Are there licenses within the applications that are not being used? And so we acquired that product from G2, and it's been amazing. Honestly, the response, our customers, I'm going to be really honest, I don't know if I've said it anywhere, our customers have been asking for this for a while. And so this was a really big deal for us because, as 23, and people started to consolidate and cut expenses and everything, our customers needed this type of capability. So it was an important acquisition for us.
Awesome. And there's so many spend management platforms. So I think there's a lot out there now. Any hints as to why you chose the G2 one and not others, assuming you looked at some others, right?
Yeah. The thing is, we needed a product that could be used by IT specifically. What you see with a lot of the stuff that is out there is it's starting to go towards a procurement type of angle, a finance angle. And those people can use it, but our customers, our community, it's IT people, right? And so that was a little bit of the dynamic. The other dynamic, which is an important one, is a lot of the spend management products, they've layered now services on top of the software, or they started with software services and added software, but we didn't want to layer on a services piece. Sure. Better Cloud is a software company, and that for us was another big challenge. Is for a lot of the companies that are out there, and by the way, they offer good services. It's just you need to bring on like a set of 200 people to do outsourced procurement, and for us, that's just not the business model.
Okay, makes sense. Makes sense. And then, would an assumption then be correct that you moved into exec chair role, at the time of exiting to Vista, or it's a part of the reason? And maybe if that is correct, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So we did the deal in the summer of 2022, and I stayed on until the summer of 23, so a year. And the reality is that I thought that I was going to stay on for a much longer period of time, and what happened is I had a realization, really on the personal front, that I needed to take a step back. As you know, and like we talked about, and as we've both experienced in our lives, for me, I only have two speeds, off or all the way on. And I was all the way on for 11 plus years. And my kids are 10 and 8. And as much as I involved them and everything else, they didn't see me probably for the first 5 years of their lives. Yeah. I was traveling 2 weeks out of the month. I hadn't seen my parents who live abroad. I had, and I basically realized I need to take a little bit of a step back before I can take a step forward again, later. And so that was the reality. And it was to be completely honest, very hard reality to face because, like I said, this is my dream. Like my dream is to run a business. My dream is to grow a business, a team. And to do that successfully and then take that step back is not the easiest thing to do. But it was necessary. And it's been a really healthy, 12 months since I took that step back, with a lot more time with my family, a lot more. And I'm thankful because I'm probably not going to get this kind of period again, for another, 10, 12 years, depending on what I do next.
Okay. We'll come to that later. and then I guess it sort of segues, why did you sell to Vista, at that time? What can you share around that?
Yeah. Vista, if you think about the journey of a company and the various stages of a business, we were getting to a scale where it made sense to find a partner who has a track record of taking companies to that next level, organically and inorganically, just to be really transparent, right? They have multiple ways of getting businesses to that next level. And we wanted to find a partner who could do that with us because we created SaaS management space. Literally, we created the space. No, I mean, we created the terminology, we created the space, the frameworks, all of that. And we got to a point where we were the largest player in the space by, I don't know, approximately 10, 12x. And the feeling was we want to play offense. We want to play offense and take the business really to the next level, and they're someone who knows how to do that. And I've told a lot of founders, CEOs who are talking to Vista or other private equity firms, the good one, I'm saying the really good ones. People say they have a playbook. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a playbook, but they have best practices that, frankly, if I knew about 8 years ago, the business would probably be doing 300 million of ARR with, 130% net retention. And, because the stuff that they know how to do across the hundreds of companies that they've worked with, it's really powerful. And so for me, that was a really intense year of a lot of learning. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the lessons learned that I've tried to write down and share. But a lot of them are the things that I learned during that year because they really are game changing types of tactics. Let's say some are tactics, some are strategies. But anyway, that was the reason. And there's a reason for that reputation. They have a machine.
No, that makes sense, and I've heard it, and I think they are. I'd say like best in breed in terms of PE for SaaS, right? And I guess it would. I'm not sure like how willing they would be to share these secrets like of us. Like,
I don't know.
That would be great if I manage that. But thanks for sharing that. And so obviously we mentioned you spoke at SaaStock USA, and like in part, like I think I've been following you, connected to you for some time, and I think post the exit to Vista, you wrote the Startup Founder Survival Guide, right? Which I think really was extremely well received, across LinkedIn, across the internet. And part of your talk at SaaStock was kind of around this. Obviously, that was to the audience that was there. We have recorded that talk if it's not already up on YouTube, then it will be soon. But tell me a little bit about what, first of all, I guess about what it is, and then why you wrote it.
Yeah, so the Startup Founder Survival Guide, basically what happened is that when I took this step back and I moved into the chairman role, I took a 4-week vacation, 5-week vacation for the first time in basically 20 years. Went with my family on a trip, went to see my parents, my sister in Israel. And by like week 4 of this trip, week 3, week 4, my wife came up to me and said to me, she said, "Not working doesn't suit you." I was like I tell people I was having reverse anxiety from not doing anything. And what I found is a lot of stuff going through my mind, like literally all day, every day. I'm like, there's all this stuff. And I needed, literally for like therapeutic reasons, I needed to sit down and write it all down because it was there and I could feel it. It's like a sneeze that you need to get out. Like I had this feeling of so I sat in a hotel room while my wife and kids were hanging out. I sat in a hotel room for 2 days and I wrote, it turned out to be 63-page Google Doc. Yeah. And it was just all the things and I just kept writing. And once I wrote it all down, I felt much better. And I started sharing with a couple of friends, a couple of CEOs, a couple of investors, and I started getting some good feedback other than this is like a stream of consciousness. I don't understand half of it, but this is interesting. And so I spent a little bit more time. I cleaned it up. I categorized it. And then someone said, "Why don't you make it into a book?" I said, "I don't really have the time. I don't think anyone's going to read like a full book." And then literally one day I woke up. I said, "I'm just going to publish this as a public Google Doc." And so I did that earlier this year, and it kind of went, I wouldn't say viral per se, but kind of viral if you know, like LinkedIn viral. And I don't know, tens of thousands of people have probably read it at this point. And it's basically these lessons that I learned, and I try in the guide to talk about the story that how I learned the lesson, why I think it's an important lesson, and then to the best of my ability, how to implement these lessons in your own company. And so that's this guide. And you know, I still don't know exactly what I'm going to do with it long term, but for now it's just out there, and people are, you know, reading it every day, asking me questions, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great sort of pay it forward service to you know, the founder community, and so, you know, thank you for that. Did you ever like have any sort of regrets of like, oh, I should have turned it into a book and gone to a publisher rather than, you know, putting it out there?
No, I don't think so. I think that I've really gotten satisfaction, like actual deep satisfaction out of the help that I think it's been for, you know, when I get someone ping me and say, Dave, this one point, like this thing helped me, you know, it made me realize that I'm not alone, or whatever that is. Like, I get satisfaction from that, and I feel like I did, like you said, gave back to the community, you know, in some way. Someone called me information socialist, you know, like, and it's like, that's, I've always felt that way of like, I wish let me put it this way. This is the stuff I wish I had access to when I started my career, and I didn't have access. And actually a lot of this stuff, like I said, it would have shortened so many learning, like it would have just made me much more successful. So I'm enjoying it right now. And like the SaaStock event, which was amazing, you know, I'm doing, you know, I'm talking about this. I'm going to a couple different events and speaking on it and the such.
It's amazing content. And yeah, but as I say, you know, thank you for writing that. And I want to, in a couple of questions, but I think this all really kind of like ties together, because obviously a lot of what you've written is from your own experience. We'll maybe pick out 3 of the 50, you know, points that you put in there, which and maybe that's hard to do, which were really helpful or could be helpful for the audience. That and I think I'm not sure like all 50 can, but strategic pillars that, you know, perhaps sort of really move the dial, you know, for you and could for others. But first, I guess, and like I said, I think, you know, this does tie into the founder survival guide. But, you know, can you share, like, you had great success with Better Cloud. You know, you got it to, as you said, like near 100 million before the Vista exit. You had an exit, a great B exit. And from that point of view, people could talk about, obviously, the successes there, which it was, right? It's a success story. But how hard was all of that, right? You know, how hard was it building and scaling Better Cloud?
Yeah, you know, it was hard. It was hard, like building any company is hard. And that's the lesson. That's kind of lesson number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 is it's hard. It's hard, you know, and I can look back on a couple of moments that were really these pivotal moments that if it wasn't for someone on my team, if it wasn't for some customer, some investor, some partner, I don't think Better Cloud would be what it is today. And there's a lot of those moments. And by the way, I can think of those moments at Cloud Sherpas and at Vocalocity and at every company I'm advising today. It's a challenging road. And you know, there was a period at Better Cloud where we saw a ceiling to the product and the business that we had for Google. Like I said, you know, we were all Google, all in on Google, and there was really a ceiling that we saw coming, and we had to make a massive bet to invest tens of millions of dollars. Ultimately, I didn't think it was going to be, but it turned out to be tens of millions of dollars to build a platform that could span across SaaS applications. And that bet could have worked and it could not have worked. And when we initially made that bet and launched our new platform, it didn't work. And it took a year a year of just a different level of grinding, not just by me, honestly, by the team, to get us to a place that kind of got us on the other side and took us from, at the time when we did that, sub 10 million of ARR to where the business got to. And so we had a couple of those moments throughout the history that were really hard, really hard.
I'm sure there were a lot of surprises and, unexpected surprises along the way. Can you pinpoint one of them and like how you dealt with that?
I think that the big thing for me that I still to this day think about all the time, I don't know so much about whether it's a surprise, but if I think about all the most challenging moments and mistakes that were made along the way, it all comes down to people and the leaders that I brought on. Like, I can basically tie every single thing to that. And when I say that, like, even with my experience, I'm not sure I really understood that until the Better Cloud journey of how critical in both directions a senior hire can be. You can hire someone and they can literally change the trajectory of the company in the best ways. And you can hire one person, and if they're in a pretty critical role, they can derail the company in a lot of ways. And that, for me, when I reflect on everything, when people say to me, what's the biggest mistake? What was the biggest, everything, I can tie back to that. I can tie back to the person who came in, restructured their whole team, increased the budget 2x, spent 8 months telling me how much this was going to happen, and then none of it happened, and I just wasted 8 months and millions of dollars and a lot of frustration. And I can also point to the person who we hired, we took a bet on, no one thought they were going to make it, and then the person ended up being the most important person at the company 6 years later. At the end, I really think at the end, people say it, but in real life, like the people at the end, that's what's going to make or break. You cannot build a business. Doesn't matter if the business is a bootstrap company with 5 people or a venture-backed company unicorn with 1,000 people. The people are what move the business. Me and you can't do, the founders, the CEOs, there's only so many hours in the day and so much we can do. Yeah. So it doesn't exactly answer your question, but like it is a little bit of a surprise, sometimes when you think about how much of an impact that one person can have.
Yeah. No, 100%. And like as we were talking, like going back over the last 9 years, it's just like, this and that. I 100% can relate to it. I think everybody that's listening as well can. What about, like, I've heard, and I'm sure you've heard about, the need for CEOs to kind of reinvent themselves, but also to constantly keep improving, to keep growing as fast as you want the company to grow. And that also, growing as fast as you want the company to grow translates down to the people, right, as well. That's why people often get, swapped out when you get to different stages. What were some of the things that you had to get better at over your journey?
A lot. I actually, one of the lessons in the survival guide is about this changing role of the CEO over time. And when I reflect on the early days, I was actually ordering the laptops for the new people that were joining. We bought the desk from IKEA for $15. I was putting the desks together before the person would join. That was my job. I was writing the emails, doing the customer support, right? That's what everyone does in the beginning. And to evolve from that to leading a group of senior leaders, more senior than me, frankly, more experienced than me, more senior than me, that evolution is not natural, actually. That's you're making a massive change to your day-to-day, to your responsibilities. So I'll tell you one thing that I had to get much better at. I actually just wrote about this on LinkedIn. This is an interesting one to start with, but it's true, is public speaking. 9 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever, the early days of Better, I was terrible. Terrible is actually an understatement. I had a fear of it. I was terrible at it. I I did a talk. It was like the perfect partner. They invited us to talk at this thing, and I got up in front of prospects, and I remember literally presenting, not knowing. I came off stage, I literally forgot what I said. I blacked out, and I realized at that time, if I'm going to build a big community of customers, if I'm going to lead this SaaS management community, I'm going to need to learn and be comfortable public speaking. And not just that, the team got to 400 something people. I needed to talk in front of my team and motivate a team. And so public speaking was a big one. Another big one for me was how not to be in the weeds on things and be comfortable that they were going to get done. That is not, for me, that was maybe one of the hardest things, because I love doing stuff. I love actually getting work done. And as the job changes, you're not really doing any work. I mean, frankly, you're leading a team, you're setting the strategy, and letting go of that. I got feedback from a couple of my leaders who said, Dave, you have to let go. You are stifling us. You have to let go. And to learn how to delegate and trust people to do the work and not be in every single thing, that was quite challenging for me. And then the third one for me is learning how to fundraise. That's a skill. That is actually a skill that I was very bad at the beginning for a whole host of reasons. But I not only did I get a lot of no's, it was like I wasn't getting through to the investors what I was building and why it was going to be amazing. Like that was a big skill that took me a lot of reps and some really hard feedback that a couple of investors who probably didn't need to give me that feedback, gave. And so those are some of the things. I mean, it's a long list, but those are some things that stick out in my mind because it took work. Not, it wasn't just natural. Like I actually had to try hard to change a behavior or change something that, is natural to me.
Thanks for sharing that. Let's jump into maybe the 3 points perhaps that, we haven't mentioned, obviously about, first 1 to 10, about how hard it is, the things that you have to change yourself, but maybe 3 things that really move the dial for the business that are within the SaaStock Founders Survival Guide.
I'm going to choose, there's a lot in there. I'm going to choose a couple that I've seen resonating with people recently. The first one is really understand who your ICP is, your ideal customer profile, and your ideal buyer persona within those customers, and get super focused there. That if anyone takes one thing away, that is the biggest impact that from a go-to-market perspective, I felt always, and my whole career, I want a larger TAM. I want a larger group. I want to sell to more personas. At the end of the day, if you get that target market right, your efficiency goes literally through the roof. And I can think back on the days where, for example, Vocalocity, it was an SMB hosted PBX, cloud PBX. We were selling to tiny customers, sub 10 employee companies. And we sold to the owner. And one day, we got an inbound lead, it's a long story, for someone who had a 100-person call center. And we decided, even though we are crushing it, we are closing deals literally multiple a day per rep, it was wild. We decided, wow, this one customer, 100 employees, they're going to pay us an entire month's worth of new ARR. We spent 6 months trying to develop the features that they needed for call centers, which, by the way, there's many call center softwares out there. We decided we're going to go do that. It completely derailed the company for a long period of time because we just got away from the ideal customer profile that we were crushing it with over and over and over again, right? And I've seen that happen so much where it feels unnatural. And actually, this was one of our investors who told us, you have to do this. You have to get more narrow. And I said, but if we do that, we're going to remove all these people out of our Salesforce instance and our reps' territories are going to get smaller. But then we did it. Close rates went up. sales cycles went down, ASP went up, and that's one big one. Like that's a really big one. Another one, which has been resonating especially recently in a couple of the talks I've given, is most people do not know how to interview. Period. If you think about the majority of us workers, we've been on the other side being interviewed, but we've prepared to be interviewed. But when you have to interview someone, did anyone train you how to do that? In 99% of the cases, actually no. And what you realize, back to the point of the people, if the people are what matter, and that's pretty much all that matters, and you're going to scale your team, you, by the way, you and your team have to get good at interviewing. And it's one of the most interesting things. I always tell this story of one of our top people went into an interview, and when she came out, I said, how was it? How did it go? And she's like, I was really nervous. She was the one interviewing the candidate. She's like, I was really nervous. I said, why? She said, I didn't know what to ask the candidate. I said, what do you mean? She said, I've never interviewed anyone before. And you're like, oh my God. And she's like one of the best people we had at the company. Yeah. And then you start realizing at Vocalocity, I mean, we had people interviewing, asking like pretty inappropriate questions, frankly, to candidates that they didn't even know they weren't allowed to ask because no one told them. And you start realizing, like, because the people are everything, you have to have a process to bring people on that has the right gates. And the only way you're going to do that is if your people know how to interview. So we interviewed anyone who wanted to interview, or we wanted them to interview from the team, had to go through interview training. And I think that's another really big lesson, that I learned. And, so that's that. And then the third one, which I think, which I see a lot of people doing more and more these days, but I would say was for me an important one, is writing down the values of the company, writing them down. I would say them through osmosis. I figured people pick them up, but writing them down, actually not saying integrity, like making them actually unique to your business, writing it down, and then celebrating those and using them for interviews, using them to give people recognition in the company. The companies that have those values, and they're authentic, not like made, again, not just for the fluff, but the real values of the company, people can use that as like an anchor to a pillar to revolve everything around. Okay, when I go do my work every day, these are the values. When we go hire someone, these are the values. When I have a question of how I should treat a customer, these are the values. Like that, writing it down, not just the values, the vision, the why, all of that, writing it down, I never really gave that credit until we did it. And then it was amazing. People they'd start writing in Slack, strive to delight was one of our values. And they would write a shout out to someone and they say they really lived up to strive to delight. No one told them to do that. But now that the values are there, people just stuff starts happening around those values. So those are, three that I would say have been resonating a lot recently with founders.
Yeah. And I mean, I would concur with those. I think we always knew our ICP as the founders, right? And we pretty much stuck to that. Although I shared, we're going through some strategy stuff with an external consultancy and value propositions, and we're looking at all the various different stakeholders, and we have our kind of like founders at number one. We've also got investors that come to SaaStock, but ultimately they're coming because the founders are there.
Right.
We've got the exhibitors that want to sell to the founders, but not only, they sell to different personas, and so there's CFOs and operators. So it kind of feels like our persona and buyer base, etc., is expanding a little bit, and I'm a bit mindful of that as well. And we didn't have values in the company for the first 3-4 years, which I think is quite common in early stage startups. But I think at that point, then you start to see a much better culture in the team. I guess a much better team. So yeah, definitely concur with that. I want to jump into, thanks for sharing that, David. I want to jump into the quickish fire round. So I'd love to know what one thing has moved the needle the most for you in your career? And you can't say your dad's BCCs.
Honestly, people don't always love this answer, but it's my work ethic. I will tell people no one will outwork, good or bad. Back to my point before, there's only two speeds really. But my work ethic is what I think has gotten me to where I am, because I'm not an expert, frankly, in too much, and I'm not, I'm not trained, frankly, in very much. It's just a lot of grit and drive. Basically, that for me has been a big reason for my success, I believe.
Yeah, awesome. What about best advice you've received?
Kind of along those same lines, I will say, I don't know if it's advice or my dad trying to get in my head, but from a young age, he said, you can do anything that you put your mind to. And that's what I live by today. If I want to do it, I will get it done. And by the way, I'm not going to say it happens 100% of the time, but with enough focus and enough drive, a lot is possible. Yeah. But you have to make a lot of sacrifices along the way. It's the question you said is like building companies. How was it to build Better Cloud? How was it? The sacrifices that people make to build these businesses. A lot of people say, oh, you can do work-life balance and this and that. Maybe. For some people, maybe. For me, I don't know how that's possible. I don't know how you get something from 0 to 1. I don't know without pouring everything into it. And that means sacrificing a lot along the way. And it's so that's if you put your mind to it, you can do whatever you want. That's I live by that.
Yeah, love that. What about biggest failure you've made and lesson learned?
Biggest failure, the hiring is the biggest failure. I don't want to give exact names, but I could say that I've made a number of very bad hires along the way in 20 years. And my lesson learned is in every single example. Actually, my head of talent made me go through an exercise. Why did I make these bad hires? And in every single one of them, I rushed the hire because I needed a person in the seat, because I was so stressed because we had an open seat and I needed to make the hire, and I rushed it, and I didn't take it through the process, and I didn't do the back channel references, and I didn't spend the time in person with like getting to know the person, and I rushed it. Every single time I rushed it, or I didn't trust my gut on the person because I was so stressed about filling the role for whatever reason. My investor was pressuring me. Someone on the team was pressuring me. I was stressed out. So the biggest mistakes I've made have all been, like I mentioned earlier, it's all been around hiring, I think.
What about, so you're a second-time CEO. We both lost CEO and Better Cloud, but in general, what's been the hardest thing about being a CEO?
I think the hardest thing is people understanding, the decisions that you have to make in that position. It is impossible to make everyone happy. That includes customers, investors, employees. It's impossible. You make this decision on a feature, you're going to make this group of customers happy, this group unhappy. You make a decision about a new benefit that you offer employees. For this group of people, it's great. For this group of people, they don't care and they want a different benefit. When you make this decision for the business and you want to sell the company, this set of investors are happy, this ones are not, whatever the case may be. I think making this, like every day, every single day, every single decision, basically, that you have, the hard decisions are hard, and it can be very lonely making those decisions. And I think that what I've seen with a number of people who have left Better Cloud and started their own companies, left Vocalocity, started their own companies, left Cloud Sherpa, started their own companies, they always say it's very lonely. It's much more lonely now in that seat being the CEO than when you're backseat driving the CEO and saying, hey, why'd you make that decision? That was a stupid decision. I would have done this. And so that's what I would say.
What about, have you got a favorite book on business and why?
I don't read too many books on business I don't read too many books in general, but I recently read Shoe Dog by The Story of Nike, and I loved that book. I loved that book. And I also read, years ago, I read Hard Thing About Hard Things, and I love that as well. And those two books I like because I think that they tell it, of course, it's all a little bit revisionist history, but it is, you do hear about the challenges. And I just think it's like exactly our conversation. Like, I think it's important people hear and read the hard things and the tough periods of time, because you just look at Nike and think they were just up and to the right. They just did, they crushed it. Like, and you don't know, I didn't know the story until I read it, and I read that thing in a day. I think I read that entire book in a day. It was amazing, and, anyway, so that's why I like those books, and I'm very inspired by that, because I feel like that's what we need more of that for entrepreneurs and for CEOs and founders.
100%. And I think for most entrepreneurs and founders, they probably certainly you hear hard about things lots, and the same reaction response for me on Shoe Dog. You just, as you said, you just thought Nike's this like mega company, and they just crushed it. But to see that they were running out of money and like all the difficulties that Phil Knight went through, it was kind of it's good to see that as a founder that actually this is what it's like, right? And,
yeah.
So as we wrap up now, David, a couple of last things. So obviously, if people want to reach out to you, where can they find you online? What's the best place? How can they do that?
Yeah, so best place to reach me, LinkedIn is usually the best place to connect with me. And I'm pretty good about getting back to people there. It's probably the best place.
There were some rumors that you might be coming to Dublin, maybe with your dad, as well in October. To speak at SaaStock. Anything you could share on that?
Yeah. I think I've been working on a presentation for a while, actually, special for Dublin that I'm hoping to deliver there. So I hope to see people there. I love the event in Austin. The people, the energy was awesome. So I'm excited to see what it's like in Dublin.
Yeah, it's great crack, and it's great energy, and really good vibe at SaaStock in Dublin. So fingers crossed we'll make that happen, I'm pretty sure. And then lastly, I just kind of want to wrap up. Like, is there going to be a third time CEO, David Politis?
Right now I've been doing a lot of advising. I'm advising a bunch of companies, been making a bunch of angel investments, and I'm really enjoying myself, but I am getting the itch pretty bad right now. And so the answer is yes, but I don't really have a what yet. but I think that there's no question. I don't think I can, like we talked about in the beginning, it's just, I miss it. I miss building a team. I miss having customers. So the answer is yes, I don't have an idea yet, but if anyone has any good ideas and wants to talk, I'm up for it.
Well, as soon as we hang up, I'll talk to you. But no, good stuff, David. Look, thank you so much. I know we ran out of time, but really enjoyed the conversation, and a pleasure to speak to you as always. I just love that you're a really genuine guy that's had great success at sharing it back, giving it back. So really appreciate that, David, and looking forward to. We'll speak before then, but looking forward to seeing you in Dublin. Will be well in October at SaaStock. So thanks so much, David Politis.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.